When was the last time you wrote a letter and mailed it to someone? You can't remember? No. Well, that's the $5 billion problem facing the U.S. Postal Service, which faces an uncertain future. Don Soifer, Executive Director of the Consumer Postal Council, joins me now from Washington, D.C. Don, thank you very much for appearing with us today. You've got a difficult story here. Mail volume in all categories way down, $5 billion of losses last year, difficult labor contract that you're working with. Absent all of that, I want to know, where is the Postal Service going? What are you going to do about this?
These are tough times for the Postal Service. It lost $5 billion last year, and it's on track to lose about the same this year. You know, mail volume is in a downhill spiral. It's been that way for years. 80% of the Postal Service's costs are labor costs, but because of its major labor deals with its 4 big labor unions, it's not in a position to be able to reduce its man hours or consolidate its facilities to cut its own costs. You know what's in your mailbox when you go to the mailbox. I mean, obviously you go there because you're looking for a letter. But the Postal Service has turned into something very different than something that Ben Franklin would have imagined. And it's got a really uncertain future as mail volume continues to drop, and there are fewer and fewer options. So
I have to ask, what is the future? I mean, everybody emails these days, or texts, or uses some other electronic device for communication. What will be the post office's role going forward? I mean, I preface that by saying, look, there's this infrastructure. Every town, every village has a post office with a van and a truck to deliver. But nobody's using, well, very few people are using that service. What happens to all that infrastructure and that service?
Well, people at the Postal Service like to talk about dot post and would like to be in the email business, and obviously Americans are increasingly using email. But then again, 75% of Americans use email now, but that number drops when you start talking about older Americans, African Americans, and poor Americans. And a lot of people just plain aren't able to use and continue to rely on the post office to send letters.
So, is it going to shrink?
Well, I mean, there's a real threat that the Postal Service's ability to control its own costs by things like outsourcing is going to be something that Congress is going to step in and interfere with. When you have an agency that's losing $5 billion a year, we don't want to see a position where the Postal Service is continuing to subsidize the big mailers. And what is the role of the consumer? Americans like their post office, and they say time and again that they don't want to see it privatized.
So you're saying that it's not going to really change. It's going to stay in business pretty much like it is now, keeps on making losses, which Congress will okay. That's what you're saying.
Americans say time and again that they don't want to see the Postal Service privatized, that they like having a post office that they can go to. But then again, are consumers going to be forced to pay for this by increased stamp prices or higher taxes or lower service? You know, the postal consumer is in a precarious position right now as regards to the future of the Postal Service.
You have to answer the question. Is it going to shrink or is it not going to shrink?
The Postal Service is going to have to find a way to reduce the labor costs that are 80% of its operating expenses. But there's a serious threat that Congress is going to stand in its way of doing that, and that puts it in a tight box.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Don Soifer.